All right, good afternoon again. It is now 6:06 p.m. and we would like to start. My name is Christine Richards. I'm the Sales and Marketing Officer at Tranquility Credit Union, and I have the esteemed pleasure of welcoming you to today's session. Today's session is going to be about the roles and responsibilities of the Supervisory Committee. It is going to be chaired by Mr. Jerome Chambers, who would share his knowledge with us on the topic, right? But as we do, as is customary for all of our webinars, we would like to open with a prayer. I see Director Jarvis is online. Mr. Jarvis, would you be able to lead us in the credit union prayer this afternoon? Okay, Director Jarvis seems to have fallen off of the call, so I would lead us in the prayer instead. Please bow your heads and close your eyes. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. All right. So a few workshop guidelines we have for you today. We're going to have an interactive and engaging session. But to enjoy this session, we ask that you please keep your cameras off unless you are speaking and your mics muted unless you are speaking. We do have a question and answer session at the back. However, our host would like us to engage and to ask questions and to be interactive with him. He asks that you either engage with him verbally, or you can leave your information in the chat and he'd be able to answer you there. Please raise your hand if you have a question and we'll get to you so that in case he's mid-sentence, you do not interrupt his flow, right? So I would like to ask Miss Annalisa Allen Benjamin to bring our opening remarks today. Miss Annalisa Allen Benjamin is the Secretary of the Board of Directors and the chair of the nomination committee at Tranquility Credit Union. Please welcome her. Miss Annalisa.
Hello, yes. Good day. I hope everybody is hearing me. And thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon as we drive interest and educate our members and encourage people to step up to leadership and share your talents with the credit union. Nomination time is upon us. And as we started last year and even some years before, we wanted to do a Know Your Credit Union series so that people could get a little more information as they consider stepping up and volunteering their time and talents to the credit union. So yesterday we had a session on the board of directors. I see with the supervisory, we have a little less people, but guess what? Each one tell one. Each one here could encourage someone to step up because we really don't want to find ourselves having to extend and extend because after all, this is our credit union. And we don't really want it to be always 20% of the people leading, doing everything. So as a democratic organization, we want to encourage everybody to join in, learn a little, and tell another person. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And tomorrow we have another session. And this is all part of our member education series. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Miss Allen Benjamin. So now I would introduce to you our featured speaker today. His name is Mr. Jerome Chambers. He's a certified anti-money laundering specialist, a member of the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, and has over 20 years experience in the financial services sector. He is experienced in areas such as policy creation, governance, financial crimes investigations, and prevention. He's also trained in counterterrorism financing, cryptocurrency, compliance and investigation, information systems, business strategy, and law. You see, that's a mouthful. Mr. Chambers is very, very educated on these topics. Mr. Chambers has pioneered the fraud conference in 2015 and 2017 in Trinidad and Tobago, and has also collaborated with many institutions to help get these policies on the way. So you're seeing he has worked with many different institutions such as the anti-kidnapping, cybercrime, fraud squad, all those other accolades listed. He is also a lecturer at Arthur Lockjack and Graduate School of Business, UWI. And the UWI School of Business, he's the president of the Association of Compliance Professionals of Trinidad and Tobago. He's also a member of the Central Bank Cyber Security Technical Working Group. He's a member of the team for implementation and recommendations of the Cabinet-appointed committee for the future of the credit union sector in national development, also a member of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani College of Labor, and Cooperative Studies. He's a corporate secretary for the Caribbean Regional Compliance Association and also a cooperative director. He's on the board of directors for Cipriani Labor College, cooperative development coordinator for Cooperative Development Division, and I believe he also have a couple other accolades under his belt, but we'll spend whole night talking about Mr. Chambers if we have to. So now I will hand you over to him, where he will now start his presentation on the Supervisory Committee and the roles and functions and responsibilities of that committee. Mr. Chambers, welcome and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Since we're recording, let me just correct some or update some information there. I'm no longer on the Board of Governors of Cipriani. Administrations change and what happens there. So I'm no longer there. I am also no longer the president of the Association of Compliance Professionals. I'm the immediate past president. And last but by no means least, I'm no longer the Cooperative Development Coordinator at the Commissioner's Office. I'm now the Executive Manager. And it is in that particular role that I speak this afternoon. Yeah? So just to set the record straight. Now, I know I shared my screen with you before, but I'm not seeing it anymore. Should I share it again?
Yes, you'd need to do that, Mr. Chambers.
Okay. I didn't realize you kicked me out. All right, all right, all right.
I apologize.
All right. Okay, so good afternoon, guys. I don't know how many of you would have been here with us last year. I hope we have some returning persons. And I hope even stronger that we have some brand new persons. My colleague there said it correctly. This is your credit union. And you have to have an interest in your credit union. That's where you have your life savings. Unless you are among those fortunate people that may have won a lotto or two, so that your life savings might be somewhere else. But for the rest of us, it's at Tranquility Credit Union. And we cannot leave it up to somebody else to pay attention. We have to MYOB, mind your own business. Yeah. And over the years, I've noticed, well, my camera is off, so you won't see how much gray hair I have, that very often you see the recycle. And we hear members say, but they're there a long time. But we are the ones to step up. We are the ones to make our mark. Yeah. And this is in the screen here, this is something that I came across a while ago. I absolutely love it. So I tend to start many of my sessions with it. And it says quite simply that your success in life will be determined largely by your ability to speak, so speak out, your ability to write, so become comfortable with that, have the strength of your conviction. All too often, sometimes I see letters of complaint coming into the commissioner's office and nobody signs off on it. It's anonymous. If it's anonymous, how are we supposed to treat with it? And the quality of your ideas in that particular order. And this afternoon session, I hope will improve or will assist the quality of ideas we have as it regards our credit union and the credit union movement as a whole. We are at a turning point within the credit union movement. We are at a pivotal point where a lot is happening, some of which is rumored, some of which is fact. And we need to ensure that our credit union is positioned in such a way that we can take advantage of the opportunities as well as protect our organization for things that may go wrong. Yeah. As mentioned before, please feel free to interrupt me as we go along. Right. Now, those of you who were here last year, perhaps I would have shared this with you. If not, I think it's so important / alarming that I'm bringing it up again. Now, this is a headline I took from the newspaper. It appeared a while ago, and it is about a case that went to the Privy Council. And I know you're saying to yourself, what does that have to do with credit union? I'm glad you asked. Now, you will get the slides, right? But I'll give you the synopsis. This is about a company called Land and Marine Construction Services. They granted a loan to somebody who was an accountant, and incidentally, this accountant was also the general manager of the credit union in which they were members, the owners of that company. Yes, you heard me well. So in that particular scenario, the general manager of the credit union, because he had become familiar with the membership, supervisory committee members, and hopeful, bear with me, he had become familiar. So let's say his name was Jerome. So when members say, hey, Jerome, how things? We type like that. So the general manager eventually approached the members who own this company for a loan. Yes, you heard me correctly. The general manager of the credit union approached the members who own this company for a loan. Now, how much money? $1.5 million. Let me pause for dramatic effect and let that sink in. The manager approached the members for a $1.5 million loan. The members of the company, the owners of the company, granted the loan to the manager through 3 checks. Seeing something in the chat window there? Oh, somebody just saying good evening. Yes, 3 checks with an agreement that the manager would repay the sum within a year with an interest rate of 6%. The loan was never repaid. The loan was never repaid. So the general manager became delinquent on this strange loan. So the company sued him. His position was, it wasn't really a loan. That he really borrowed the money from the company and lent it to a third party. And the third party failed to pay him back. That's why he didn't pay back. So I ask you, if you're on the supervisory committee and you become aware of this transaction, what would you do? How would you handle it? How would you investigate it? This particular manager was arrested and charged, and believe it or not, is once again working in the credit union as the general manager while he is on bail. Supervisory committee. Is there a policy that says this cannot happen by Tranquility Credit Union? Because don't go away with the thought of that can happen by us, you know. The more people think it can happen by them, it is the more that they are attractive for things like this to happen. Because you let your guard down. While on bail, and the last hearing for this matter was in April, if I remember correctly, the person is still the manager. He was allowed to come back in as manager of the credit union when he was released from jail. I kid you not. So now that I have your attention, yeah? Let's talk a little bit about the law, because credit unions do not exist in a vacuum. There are a number of different pieces of legislation, pieces of law that they must operate under. Yeah? Excuse me. Under the Cooperative Societies Act, which is the act of parliament that says that Tranquility Credit Union can exist, there are three main areas as a member of the supervisory committee I need you to always keep in your mind. Those main areas are as follows. The constitution of the credit union, that is just another way of saying the bylaws. The operations of the credit union, how it operates from day to day. What are the internal procedures and practices? Those things you must know. Let's pluck one out of the air. So that the member, two main areas of business the credit union will have: deposit taking and the facilitation of loans. So when the member applies for the loan, what is the flow between that application and the approval, together with who has the authority to grant the approval, and when that member leaves with the check/money, which would be the proceeds of the loan? What are those touch points? What are the internal controls that the supervisory committee must be able to verify for those particular things? And the third main area, because I said three main areas, is the financial position. The supervisory committee must be able to understand what is the financial position, what is the real financial position of Tranquility Credit Union, which infers the supervisory committee must be comfortable with the interpretation of financial statements, or, in the absence of, be able to digest management accounts. Yeah? Now, these three very specific areas you will find under Section 4 of the Cooperative Societies Act. Section 4 of the Act speaks to the fact that the regulator has the ability to conduct an inquiry into the constitution, operations, and financial position of every credit union in the country. These three things are so important, supervisory people, in that after this inquiry is conducted, the regulator actually has the ability to then prepare a notice of findings to the credit union and give them, I think it's 2 months, to correct the flaws. And if the flaws are not corrected within the time period, the regulator then has the ability to fire the entire board that the membership elected. Has the ability to fire the entire board that the membership elected and replace it with a board of the regulators choosing for a period not exceeding 2 years. It's that important. God forbid, what will be the state of Tranquility Credit Union if that happened to us? And you may be wondering, has this ever happened before in Trinidad and Tobago? Yes. Short answer is yes. Is it likely to happen again? Short answer is yes. I can't tell you to who, but yes. So once upon a time, because all good stories start with once upon a time. You have to know your history. Tranquility Credit Union didn't come out of thin air. And it is building on the foundation of those that went before. Cooperatives have been existing in Trinidad and Tobago for many years. I would say probably more than 80 years. So in preparing, we won't go deep into it today. Maybe after you guys are elected, we can do that. But out of cooperatives, a credit union is just one type. So which was, and maybe I should have put this as my poll question or my $100 question. Every now and again, I have a session, I say $100 question. Whoever get right, get $100. But since you all wanted a virtual session, that means I'll have to give a virtual $100. So let me throw that out there. Which credit union was the first credit union in Trinidad and Tobago? Let me hear you all. Don't all rush to answer at once. Take your time. But I should have walked with my Jeopardy music. All now is a good time to play it. Nobody ain't taking that way. You mean to tell me my $100 safe? Oh my goodness.
I answered in the chat, Mr. Chief.
Oh, it's have something blocking being recorded, transcribed by AI companion company. Let me see. All right, in the chat. All right. Let's see, very unethical. Must scroll along there. Somebody say OWTU. Wrong. Marlon say Cathedral Credit Union. Wrong. Erika say Eastern Credit Union. Wrong. Eastern Credit
Angeline?
Union is Eastern Credit Union actually when it started was called Bermuda's Biscuit Employees Credit Union. Let's see.
One of
Police
those, one
Credit
of those.
Union. Who is Nadine there? Nadine
Oh,
getting the virtual $100.
oh yeah.
Yes. Health Services Credit Union was the first registered credit union in Trinidad and Tobago. So that is a piece of serious history again. Yeah? So well done. Right. And incidentally, the first cooperative, I don't remember the name, but it was actually an agricultural cooperative. Yep. So good stuff there. Move to the head of the class. See what is in the chat window there. New message. No, somebody say go Nadine. All right, so statutory committees. Now we will touch on board and credit because the supervisory committee also has to understand what they do in order to perform their job properly. So my next question, I like to ask a lot of questions. You see, if you don't ask me questions, I will ask you questions. So that we have heard the term statutory committees, and Annalisa is anxious to tell us why we call them statutory committees. All right, Annalisa, I'm not holding you back anymore. The floor is yours.
Because we are elected by the membership and we are also enshrined in our bylaws, mandatory, and we are elected.
Jagdish is saying Annalisa is warm, but she ain't hot yet. So,
Okay.
Jagdish, sort them out. Let me hear. Don't leave me hanging there now. Ramdas, I need you. God, Father. All right, all right. Again. Cover them, man. Marlon, help them out. We hear it all the time. Statutory committees, statutory committees. See, we're in chat with.
I'm hoping it's going on the basis, maybe something based on that is legislated. The committee.
That sounds like a question mark at the end of it.
Well, statutory in a sense means some statute that that governs how the committees operate.
You're getting the second virtual $100. Yeah?
Okay.
Because statute is law. And the committees are created by the legislation or by the law, hence statutory committees. And this is important because each committee, credit, board, supervisory, is named in the statute, is named in the law. So they are created under the same force. They may have different functions, but no one statutory committee is more important than the other. And I want you to hold on to that and remember that. Because all too often one gets the impression that people think, well, the board is king. And the rest of them is just piao piao. By the way, that is incorrect. Each one of them was created by the statute. They all have authority. Their function is simply different. Yeah? So Marlon for the second virtual $100. All right, we're switching gears here because we need to share as much information with you as possible. At some point in time when you are serving, you will come across a state official who calls themselves a cooperative officer. That person could be identified not by a badge, but by a precept. And on the precept, on the outside, there's a coat of arms. Well, I think all of them might have the coat of arms with 3 ship rather than the steel band. I don't think it changed yet for them. And on the inside, there would be a picture of the individual. It would be signed by the commissioner for cooperative at that time, and it would reference 2 particular sections of the Cooperative Societies Act, Section 3 and Section 5. And again, Supervisory Committee, those 2 sections, I don't expect you to remember every single thing, but there are a few nuggets that we're pulling out here. Section 3 of the Act basically says, and let me hang on, I think it might be easier for you. All right. If it is, at least you have a little idea who you're talking to. Right. I'm going to carry down my camera so you can see the ball here a little bit. Nice. Here we go. Yeah. So section 3 basically says that there shall be a commissioner for cooperative development who will perform the duties of registrar and will have general powers of supervision. So the cooperative officer, their precept would reference this. It would also reference Section 5 of the Act. And Section 5 of the Act says that the commissioner will have access at all times to all books, records, and documents of cooperatives. So those are two things that all the statutory committee needs to be aware of, in particular, the supervisory committee. Yeah? All right. Connecting dots for you. Now, as I mentioned before, the Cooperative Societies Act mentions the Commissioner for Cooperative. Nowhere in the Cooperative Societies Act will you see the word cooperative officer. You will, however, at Section 75C, where the Commissioner has the ability by an instrument in writing, think precept, to delegate to anybody any of his powers, except one, and that's the power of delegation. So, the cooperative officer is precepted, operates under delegated authority from the commissioner, but does not have the ability to go to somebody else and delegate them. Yeah? And it must be an instrument in writing. I mentioned before Section 3 and 5, and this is just a snapshot of what Section 3 actually says. Mentioned to that before. And this will be, oh, I don't have 5. Probably have it in the wrong order. All right. The next most important part for you guys to remember or to be aware of. The phrase officer. Because you all would hear X is an officer of the credit union. Marlon is an officer of the credit union. What does that mean? Is a board member an officer? Is a supervisory committee member an officer? Is a credit committee member an officer? Because when we say an officer of the credit union, what do we mean? Lauren, this look like yours. Tell them.
Well, my understanding is an officer is not a paid employee of the credit union, so you're not on staff.
All right. Claudette is disagreeing with you. So I'm giving Claudette an opportunity to explain why she's disagreeing with you. Go brave, Claudette. Gomez. Well, you thought this was a session where all you just sit down and listen to me talk? Well, what trouble is this? All right, we had to discuss all your certificate of participation. Tarika, talk to me. Now, guys, don't be worried. You don't have to get everything right. And remember, this is a learning session. Yeah? I've seen something in the chat that I'm gonna scroll down. Nadine want to get an A today, boy. See Nadine jump out again. All right. Tarika, let me hear you. Now, Nadine is suggesting that an officer is someone who is elected by the membership to serve on a committee. Is Nadine correct? Or is she so wrong she could roll? Only don't be afraid to challenge her. Nadine didn't bring no apple for me. No, get it? Apple for the teacher. Tough crowd, boy. Marlon is saying she's correct. So we have two people that might be correct or two people that might be so wrong they could roll. Natasha, sort them out. Oliveri. So, all right, let me put something into the mix. If Marlon and Nadine are correct, does that mean that showing Cambridge is not an officer? Things to make you go, Yes, virtual $100 people, come on, rush in. Don't be lucky and coward. I hear any wheels turning and all their brain from quite here.
Oh,
Now,
ex
supervising.
officio.
So we are creating a post called ex officio officer. No trouble now. Now, supervisory committee, let me give you one example why this is hugely important. If you are reviewing loans granted to members, loans granted to officers must take a particular pathway if the loan is in excess of their shares, deposits, and dividends, and accumulated dividends, sorry. Somebody said the GM is only an officer because the board elects him. The board doesn't elect an employee. An employee is hired under a contract of employment. Now, these things have become issues in other credit unions, so that's why I raise it with you, so you could be better prepared. All right, let me help all you out. And since we're struggling with this, I'm being very specific for you. Under Section 2 of the Cooperative Societies Act, so early up in the game, Section 2 deals with definitions. Incidentally, does anybody have a copy of the act with them? I know all they see I come in to do a session, walk with all the act, eh? Yeah, it's required. So Section 2 says, and I will say it slowly, an officer includes the chairman or president, secretary, treasurer, member of the board, or other person empowered under the regulations or under the bylaws of a society to give directions with regard to the business of that society. So based on what I've just read, is Mr. Cambridge an officer? Right, Nadine. So you see, we could draw a distinction between an officer and an elected officer. All right, it's like somebody do a little copy and paste there. You walk in. Now you're looking all right there. So that anybody who is empowered under the act or the bylaws to give directions on the business of the society is an officer. They may not be an elected officer, but they are an officer. So for supervisory in particular, when you are doing your checks, when you're doing your supervisory audits, when you are looking at the loans granted to officers, this becomes relevant. So I want you to hold on to that. As usual, feel free to ask any questions as we're going along, right? And of course, my second question is a yes. It depends on what role. I see that you have you don't call it a branch, you call it a something branch. Well, let me call it a branch. So if there's a member of staff who is in charge of that branch, and that person is empowered to give directions on the business of the credit union, then satellite office stands. then isn't that person by the definition also an officer? All right, so we're holding on to that. Now, I had to get them juices flowing. So I throw in something out at you. Don't panic. We're not going in depth into it. We'll go into in depth if we ever have another session for people who are actually being elected to the supervisory committee. But this is the mindset I want you to have. So let's call this credit union Mountain View Credit Union. It has about $250 million in assets. Press pause. If you are serving on the supervisory committee of Tranquility Credit Union, you must know what is the asset base of Tranquility Credit Union. That's a given. So this credit union has experienced rapid growth over the past 2 years, increasing membership by 35% and the loan portfolio by 40%. Because of this growth, the credit union recently hired a few new loan officers and implemented a new information system regarding loans. So during a routine audit, and yes, at the beginning of the term, the supervisory committee should have an audit plan. What they plan to do every month for the year. So during one of these routine audits, several concerning patterns emerged in loan processing procedures. There are a few issues that they discovered. I want you to take note. There were gaps in the documentation. Now, documentation in loans is huge. So 15% of the loans that were granted, 15% of the sample that you took and examined lacked required income verification documents. Now, that is a fancy way of saying what? Payslip, job letter, those sort of things. Yeah? So 15% lacked required income verification documents. Now, I want you to start connecting some dots. As a member of the supervisory committee, if that loan goes delinquent, how do you trace it back? Or is this an indication that there is now a high probability that that loan is going to go delinquent because the income of the applicant was not verified? All right. Oops. Hang on. Right. Within your loan policy, there should be, what's this? Hold on. Inadequate information. Yeah. What's this? It means the capacity to repay was not looked at. Well, not so much not looked at, not verified. Yeah? And guys are responding to stuff in the chat window. So each loan officer, I will assume, based on your credit policy, has a particular loan approval limit. And you are discovering that there were violations in that policy. A written policy is hugely important. So 3 instances where the loan officers approve loans exceeding their individual authority limits without proper secondary approval. So that means as the supervisory committee, you need to know how many loan officers there are. You need to know what approval limits they have, and you need to know how they acquired those approval limits. And finally, you need to know if I am dealing with a loan that is in excess of my approval limit, what is the proper process that needs to be followed? Remember I mentioned they put a new IT system, a new information system. So every information system, and that's the beauty of IT, it leaves a digital footprint. So if something has gone wrong, you should be able to trace back to see who was doing the action. And in this routine audit, it showed 127 manual overrides within a 3-month period. Now, The manual override is a facility that allows you to make adjustments, but there must be proper documentation to justify why the manual override happened. Have you ever gone to the bank and you're by the teller and the teller calls somebody? I'm trying to think of a specific instance. Oh, you will even see it by the grocery. And the teller would shout out to the supervisor, but I forget what it is. Authorization, right. And somebody comes across, looks, passes their badge. That's a manual override. But the person who's doing it is checking first before they do the manual override, because once they pass the badge, it is recording that they authorized it. Segregation of duties. Again, remember constitution, operations, financial position. You must understand how the credit union operates on a day-to-day basis. Segregation of duties is an internal control mechanism. So in this case, you're seeing one employee was found to be both processing loan applications and updating member account information without a supervisor reviewing it. So a number of very specific things. So I've given you 2 minutes to think about this before I start asking questions. So what immediate actions should the supervisory committee recommend to management? That is one. How would you evaluate how effective the current internal controls are? And I think I have a third one there. What monitoring procedures do you think should be established? Right, and the fourth one. How can the committee ensure proper segregation of duties during periods of rapid growth? Because we want the organization to grow. Yeah? So those are 4 very specific questions as it relates to what we looked at there. I know we can't go deep into it. We will do that another time. But I want to get you thinking, yeah? As to how these things happen, how you can improve it, what to look for in the credit union. Any questions on what I've dealt with so far? All right. Remember, if you do ask me a question, I will start to ask you, eh? All right. I'll go in again. The Cooperative Societies Act, Chapter 8103, is the main legislation that says Tranquility Credit Union can exist and it can function. But that's only one piece. There are lots of other laws that come into play that, although we don't need to know 100%, we must be familiar with them. And on a day-to-day basis, believe it or not, I keep coming across these things from time to time. Should I say that, Brian? Yeah, I could say it. Over the last 2 to 3 years, I recall a number of situations where persons have filed or taken legal action against the commissioner's office. They call it filing for judicial review. In some cases, well, you need permission to file for judicial review. In some cases, the judge turned them down. In some cases, it allowed it to proceed, but the commissioner has never actually lost a case, which is interesting, right? Let's see, what's this next message? I know you're not going into detail, but can you at least give us one example for the questions on the previous slide? Oi! All right, Nadine Beg for you. Go backwards. All right. All right, the second one, evaluating the effectiveness of current internal controls. I would suggest, right, if this was a hardcore supervisory committee session, first thing I like to do is we need to understand what we're talking about. So it's important everybody in the supervisory committee understand what an internal control is. How do we define it? How do we recognize it when we see it? And by extension, how do we recognize when somebody is trying to bypass the internal control? So let me give you an example. Let's say, I don't remember offhand, let's say we use receipt books still in the credit union. Receipt books is a tool where we would give acknowledgement to a member that they've done a financial transaction and this is the evidence of it. Now, if it's a receipt book that's coming, let's say from the printry, and let's say government printry, you cannot have the same person ordering the receipt books, issuing the receipt books, collecting the used receipt books. That is not a separation of duty. Because when things like that happen, it means that somebody may have a receipt book in circulation, that is to say, using, or they may have two receipt books using at the same time. So one particular version goes into accounts for processing, but the member gets another version. As sometimes we call it the Columbus method. I don't know if you guys are students of history, but you may or may not remember, Columbus had two logbooks, right? One for the sailors to keep them quiet, and one for himself to see exactly how lost he was. So you need to ensure that you have different people performing the functions within the same line. You have the same person. You need a check and a balance. Does that help, Nadine? Right, cool. All right. So first and foremost, and this becomes important, particularly if you are updating your bylaws. So the general manager of a credit union called me today. He said, Chief, we want to update bylaws and we want to put X. And when he was halfway through, I say, let me stop you. The answer is no. You can't do that. He said, but why, boy? I say, because your proposed amendment violates what may be termed as a right of a member or a right of a citizen to have access to the property. And as long as the Constitution, which is chapter 1, remember the CSA is chapter 81, right? Our Constitution is viewed as our supreme law. Matter of fact, the citation says that. This is the supreme law, Trinidad and Tobago, and you cannot have any other laws that contradict this law. And if you do, then it is void to the extent of the contradiction. Let me give you an next example. And this will be important for the nomination committee. When a nomination committee is appointed by the board, they may establish their own terms of reference. That is perfectly allowed. But once upon a time, there was a nomination committee in a credit union that set up a term of reference and a system of screening, and they screened out or refused to screen a particular member based on the fact that that member was employed in another credit union. The member believed that his rights were being infringed, and he took the credit union's nomination committee to court. Yes, he did. And he won the case. The judge ruled while the nomination committee had the authority to establish its own procedures it did not have the authority to establish procedures that infringe upon the rights of the member as established within the bylaws. And there was nothing in the bylaws that said I would not be eligible if it is I was employed in a credit union, another credit union. Oh, this is hugely important because we're going through a nomination process here. So let me pause. Is there anybody who does not follow what I just spoke about? Oh, you guys are sure? Because I didn't make that up, eh? The case citation for that is actually just now. Like the Ginkgo working, the man name just went straight out of my head. It might come back. But it was actually somebody who wanted to go up for election in Eastern Credit Union. Gerard Matthews, that's his name. Gerard Matthews versus Eastern Credit Union. And he won the case. So, something to think about.
Good evening, sir.
Yes?
Marlon here. Question. So,
Yeah.
with reference to what you just stated, it was in relation to the bylaws of that specific credit union per se, right?
Correct.
So if the bylaws it was stated that one of the criteria would have been that the nominee should not be a employee of another credit union, then it would have been applicable.
Yes. And I was hoping somebody asked that because I'm aware of at least I think two or three bylaws of credit unions that specifically speak to ineligibility if the person is serving on a statutory committee in another credit union or is employed in another credit union in a particular capacity like general manager or auditor. So the bylaw says that, so that the nominating committee is not infringing on any right because the bylaw has already been passed by a special majority at a general meeting. And that's the difference. Yeah? All right. So, I mean, to me, the movement has become so interesting. 10 years ago, we probably would not be having this conversation. But here we are. Times change, right? The Financial Institutions Act, while it does not directly relate to credit union, there are at least about two parts that have begun to affect it. The most recent being an amendment to the FIA, which would have occurred in 2021. And that particular amendment now allows a credit union, if it so desires, to apply to the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago for an e-money license. That is for a license to issue electronic money, similar to, because was Republic Bank one again? Encash, similar to that. So credit unions can actually do that now. And as I've been warning credit unions for the last year, e-money is something that has been happening in Trinidad and Tobago for about the last year and a half. Republic Bank was the first one to do it. There are others doing it now. Massive Finance actually got a license not too long ago. TSTT, well, B-Mobile, got a provisional license around February last year. So, Supervisory, how is your credit union preparing for that? Now, you might say, why my credit union need to prepare for that, Jerome? Here's why. If I take a loan from Tranquility Credit Union and I come to pay using e-money from B-Mobile, and you haven't considered how to accept that money, am I delinquent? Or can you say that I'm delinquent? Because I came to pay, right? So something to think about. We go down, the next one is the Truck Act, Chapter 8807. And Truck Act becomes very important to you if we are talking about salary deductions. Yeah? What does that mean for the credit union? Can the salary deductions be enforced by the credit union? We go down again, the Computer Misuse Act. The Computer Misuse Act is not new legislation. It has existed since the year 2000, but it governs every bit of data and use of computers within the organization. And Tranquility Credit Union is computerized. You have lots of information stored about persons' personal finances. You have some employees that have devices that belong to the credit union, devices that they may go home with. And when they go home with it, who has accessed it? Electronic Transfer of Funds Crime Act. Tranquility Credit Union has Visa debit cards. Is Visa right? Or there's some kind of debit card. I think it's Visa.
Yes, correct.
No.
It's Visa.
Right. Because somebody was having a conversation with me about MasterCard. And I said, but is it Tranquil who a MasterCard boy? Couldn't remember. So Visa debit. And as long as you have gone into that space, you must know about the Electronic Transfer of Funds Crime Act. If one of your members goes by a Lynx machine and uses that card and something goes wrong, who's liable? Is it Tranquility Credit Union or is it the member? So supervisory committee, you see the amount of thing you ought to look at now? And I ain't going deep into that, I'm just scratching the surface. Because the Electronic Transfer of Funds Crime Act was created long before you had that Visa debit. It meant that other people, your competitors, were getting burned. So when you got into that, are you aware of what they were getting burned about? Moving right along, Limitation of Certain Actions Act, Chapter 709. Again, Supervisory Committee. Now, if this was a credit committee session, I would have jumped all over that. But instead, I will simply say, Supervisory Committee, when you're doing your checks, loans that go delinquent, what would be the time period beyond which a member could claim my loan is statute barred, and as such, the credit union cannot force me to pay? You know, people could say that, right? Yes. How do you bypass those time periods? Well, first you have to know what the time period is. But how do you bypass them? When you send a demand letter, what should that demand letter look like? So when you're reviewing, look at the person's file. Did the person get a demand letter? Or did the person get a letter that say, we have noticed that we haven't received your payment. If you get a chance, please pop in. Or was the person given a 7 or 14-day deadline to come in? And if they were given a 7 or 14-day deadline, how do you calculate those days in the land of public holidays? Central Bank Act. Chapter 7902. And in particular, well, Section 44C, I should mention, deals with the emergency powers of the central bank. So it basically says, and it happened in 2009, which is Act number 4 of 2009, that anytime the central bank is of the view that a financial institution poses a risk to the financial stability of Trinidad and Tobago, it doesn't care who regulating them, it coming in. And last but by no means least is the Interpretation Act. And the Interpretation Act provides guidance and definition for you when all the others confuse you. So you see, just like I mentioned there, if you give me a 17, sorry, not a 17, a 7 or 14-day deadline to respond to something, then how do I calculate those days? Is it working days? Is it straight days? The Interpretation Act has a section dealing with time and distance that gives guidance on that. Right. Switching gears again. So if your audited financials are late, whose one should you be concerned? Is there any inference that you can draw from that? And I think my next question is, oh no, let me not go there yet. Let me pause here. I want somebody to answer this one for me.
Hi, Joe Marlin here. With
All
regards
right.
to the first question, why should we be concerned? Now, audited financials really deals with regards to the state of affairs of the organization. So, with regards to whether we in debt, we the red or the black, and when something is audited, it gives me a good picture of where we are and where we want to be. Now, if that is late, then it will more or less trigger a red flag and be like something is up, and somehow the auditor has some issues. Either inadequate information is being provided to them, or whatever they have received, it is not adding up. The math's not matching, as they would say. So somehow there's something wrong there, and that would make me a bit, it would be a bit worrisome to me with regards to the organization.
All right. Sounding good. Who next? Now, there's a huge one. Eh? If I were to tell you just how many credit unions are late in the audited financials, you would bawl. Now, I hope Tranquil is not one of them.
We are
Eh?
not late. We are on time. Nothing late, like 2 years, like some big credit unions.
or like 14 years, like at least one that I can think of. Because we talk about a financial institution here, that's where you are. So that if you are late in your audited financials, it begs the question, how are you spending any new money when you do not have proper records or idea about what you've spent already? Can I even say that you're a going concern? What is the supervisory committee doing about this? Are they raising appropriate question? Is there a record that they have raised questions about this? Because for something like this, you can't just take what somebody say, well, all right, well, they say so and so. No. What is the auditor saying about this? Was there even a management letter? Have you seen it? Did you have access to it? Now, this last one I put in because I was dealing with another cooperative and they started to tell me about, well, we got the audit from the board. I say, was it signed by the auditor? No. I say, so what did you get? You got words on sheets of paper? Because an unsigned final draft says nothing. It gives you no comfort whatsoever. So should you even accept something like that? You're changing gears again. because we need to make this thing as practical as possible. Let me see something in the chat window there. Let me see. All documents must be signed. Quite correct, Annalisa?
Jerome, one question before we go forward.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so to host an AGM, you must have your audited financials.
Correct.
So if I'm late, that means my AGM is delayed.
Correct.
If I'm delayed by 2 and 3 years, my question is, how does an organization continue with regards to spending? Because maybe you don't have any approved budget. So how is that?
Correct. So it is suspect whether or not you are spending money with any authority. That's one. Two, it also raises a question about the terms of office of the people who continue to sit and spend money that you don't have authority to spend. Now, your bylaws would say your term of office is from AGM to AGM, but that presupposes that your AGM is an annual event, not a triannual event, but an annual event. So all of those things, one on top of the other, and when that is happening, again, it begs the question, what is the supervisory committee doing? Where's the correspondence? Where have they written? Where have they agitated? Where's the evidence of that? So let me get an next example again. Because we're trying to make it practical. So the president of the credit union has recommended at a joint committee meeting that we donate $5 million to the Tranquility Credit Union Foundation. Now, we're not debating if the foundation does good work or not. Let's assume it does fantastic work. But two things, I forget to add in the other one, but first thing, what financial information you need to make a decision, that's one. And two, is the foundation properly registered? Because recently I was having a conversation with FIU. And in chatting, I mentioned to them that there are a number of credit unions that actually have non-profit organizations. We call it a foundation and we name it after some founding member of the credit union. We might call it a non-governmental organization, which is properly now called a NPO, a non-profit. But those things now fall under the purview of FIU, depending on how much money is passing through it. So, supervisory committee, does the credit union operate/own any charitable foundation? And if it does, has it been registered under the Non-Profit Organizations Act of 2015? Because that registration action triggers other things, including the watchful eye of the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, let's go back. The financial information, because we talk about audited financials, right? So if you are talking about making any donation, you need to look at the balance sheet. Well, they have a different name for it now. Who knows what's the different name? They don't really call it balance sheet again. It's only old people like me that say balance sheet.
Is financial position or something?
Right. Statement of financial position.
That's it.
Tomato, tomato. Same damn thing. Right? The auditors just do that to confuse us non-accounting people. So, the balance sheet or the statement of financial position, the income statement, receipts and payments. Now, depending on who is your auditor, they will give you all kind of talk about that last one. Receipts and payments. They said, a long time thing, we don't do that again. But here what? The Cooperative Societies Act says they must produce receipts and payments. Why? because it is the simplest accounting for your average member to understand. It's just a listing of all the money you receive and all the money paid out. No fancy adjustment or anything. The app, until it's been amended, says you must produce a receipt and payments. Cash flow statements. No. Cash flow statements are somewhat difficult to understand and follow. I will accept that. But there are ways as the supervisory committee you could become familiar with. I recently was handed audited financials for a credit union, and I'm choosing my words carefully, for the year 2023. And I wanted to do a little quick review. Well, accounts receivable, account payable, that's something else. And there's, no, receipts and payments, that's what the access. Because remember, your average member may not have a full understanding of finances. So we want to break it down. We want to keep it simple. Yeah, so I was actually sitting in the airport car park waiting on a flight. And I said, let me do a little quick and dirty review of these finances. So I went to the cash flow statement. And normally if I'm in a hurry, I ignore everything on the top and I focus on 3 lines, only 3 lines. One line says cash at the start of the year. The other line says cash at the end of the year. And the third line relates to the difference between the two, net change in cash position. That gives you a really quick and dirty look of how much cash you ended up at the end of the period. Next time you look at your financials, look at that period. Say no more on that, I will sell out the information. Let's just say I was shocked in the car park at the airport. Right, so a little snapshot. It's good for everybody but supervisory. If you want to see how profitable your credit union was 1 year compared to the other, use the income statement. So I looked at the income statement. Yeah, I could say it this way, in the car park and the airport. And year on year, I saw something in excess of $21 million loss. What does that say about profitability year on year? In excess of $21 million loss. Growth assessment, use the income statement. Trying to do an assessment as whether or not the organization is growing. If you want to get into a new venture, pay attention to cash flow. You want to talk about dividends? Because dividends normally represent money leaving the organization to go out to members. Cash flow. All right. Now we good so far, right? I know I hit you with a few things there. So I'm bringing it back down to the easy stuff. Formal definition that comes from the International Cooperative Alliance says that a cooperative is an association of persons that have a level of autonomy. So that Tranquility Credit Union is autonomous from NP. You come together voluntarily and you have some common need, some common thing that joins you together, that binds you together, hence the phrase, a common bond. And it is democratically controlled. Now, is it a cooperative? If your board proposes, supervisory people, that when we talk about dividends, we will refuse to give dividends to members who have not borrowed any money during the year. Does that sound like a cooperative enterprise? Or does that sound like you are penalizing persons because they are net savers? Can a credit union function without net savers? Because your pulls ratio says you can't lend out all the money that you collect. Let me see, what's the new message there? So Hugh says penalizing. No. Is it that you mean that they're penalizing and then no, you can't do that? Or is it that you're saying that they're not penalizing? And I make sure. You know, you tell me, yes. I'm being miserable. That you're doing it right. All right, we're on the same page. There is a credit union that I recently became aware has been doing that for years. So that either you're not paying dividends to net savers or you're paying dividends at a lower rate to a net saver than you're paying to somebody who borrowed. No, I don't know where people just get these things from. That flies in the face of what a cooperative is. As we used to say a long time, the cooperative ethos. Yeah? All right. That we about 7:30. Is 8 o'clock we supposed to finish?
Hi, sir.
When I started talking. Second?
Hi, sir. Surratt here. My apologies. I can't
Uh-huh.
seem to find the raising hand icon. I do
Okay.
apologize for projecting. I just wanted to make a comment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that information on that. Regarding the analogy that you gave in that, not paying dividends to members who are net savers because they don't borrow loans. I personally experienced a similar thing like that, Mr. Chambers, because
Don't make joke.
as somebody, yes, sir.
No, I said don't make joke. You serious?
Yeah, because I applied to the bank for a credit card, and
Uh-huh.
during the process with it, I was rejected because the bank say I didn't take a loan with them. But I never had a reason to
Oh,
take a loan with them because I manage my money fairly well. And I'm also a young person.
that's something different. Now, the bank has a different system of operating. Remember, the bank is not a credit union. So the bank really is looking for a credit rating, and in the absence of never borrowing, technically speaking, they don't know you. So they don't want to take a risk on you. The example I gave you is the example of a credit union where you are part owner and you simply want to save your life savings, but they are penalizing you because they're saying that you're wrong for not borrowing. So there's a slight difference there. Yeah. Let's see, penalizing, no, yes. That is. I see. Okay. What it is you see there? Is the chatter trying to figure out, people? Let's say, who is the recipient income statement? Right, I think I may have lost. Oh, right. Wouldn't that be infringing on a person's right to receive dividends like other members and the Constitution Act? Now, that's interesting, Nadine. Now, there is no right to receive dividends that is an absolute right. Yeah? You are supposed to be able to receive dividends if, one, you are a shareholder, two, you have money in the organization, and three, the organization makes a surplus. So it's not absolute, it's conditional on those things. Now, what this credit union seems to have done is that they would, by a board resolution, say, we pay an X percentage to, I forget how they phrased it, but it was phrased in such a way that if you had never borrowed, the resolution would not apply to you getting dividend. And when I came across, I said, well, what kind of madness is this? How is this possible? And I realized they passed it in a resolution. So again, it's how we educate members, because when I saw it, I said to myself, the members who are voting in favor of this either don't understand what they're voting for, or they're doing so in a selfish fashion because they're saying, well, I borrowed, so I will get, so to hell with everybody else. But if you did not have net savers, you really wouldn't be able to lend money. It's other people's money you're lending. And it's important that we keep those things in mind. Yeah? All right. So a snapshot of a few things here. All right, to me. All right. Section 10 is important, Supervisory Committee. It relates to who can be a member of a credit union. And in particular, if you go down to Section 10, subsection 2, it relates to minors who are members of credit unions. What would their rights be? What they could do? What they can't do? Yeah. Some of the others I'll just highlight it for you. Section 45. What's section 45 again? Hang on. Right, that's an important one. And actually today I saw this again pop up, section 45. When you are checking supervisory committee, investments that the credit union has, you need to check to see what type of investments are there. Is it an investment in a licensed financial institution that has a license from central bank? Is it an investment in a government-backed security? If that is the case, you're okay. Once it comes outside of that, then you must have specific approval from the commissioner's office. That's section 45. Part 4 of the Act, section 43, deals with a restriction on loans. You can't grant loans to people who are not members except with the commissioner's permission. You cannot grant loans to officers in excess of their shares, dividends, and shares deposit and accumulated dividend unless you go through a particular process. We all talk about things like round robin or joint committees. Those things are important. We have section 51. 51 deals with what we highlighted before, audit of the financial statements. Yep. 52, reconstruction of societies. It has always been a practice that in order for a credit union to grow, it might want to consider merging with other credit unions or amalgamating two or more coming together to end up with a larger entity. Yeah. Section 67 deals with the settlement of disputes. So section 67(1) talks about wherever you have a dispute concerning the business of the society, that's important. Does it concern the business of the society? And that dispute occurs between a member, a past member, or somebody claiming through a member, then it is a dispute within the ambit of section 67 of the Act. All right. Section 69. I'm going through quicker. So, section 69, hugely important for supervisory committee because it deals with the issue of corrupt practice or bribery. So, do you have a case of a loan officer who is accepting a commission in order to approve a member's loan? Corrupt practice or bribery. Yeah? Section 70, falsely obtaining, withholding, or misapplying the property of the society. There are things that belong to Tranquility Credit Union. If you are an agent, an officer, or an employee of the credit union, and you are in possession of the property of the credit union, you are doing that on behalf of the organization, not on your own behalf. Yeah? And finally, I have there section 71, which deals with offenses committed by officers, employees, or agents of the credit union. Yeah, there are charges for that as well. Yeah, right. Right. Few more again. Now, in every act of parliament, you would have the substantive act, which deals with sections, which says Tranquility Credit Union can exist. And then you will have the regulations. And in the regulation, it says how Tranquility Credit Union can exist. Yeah. So the act, the section will say jump, and the regulation will say how high. So regulation 15. And I mean, there are a lot, but I just pull out a few really important ones for you guys. So regulation 15 deals with the authority of the annual general meeting. It is the single most important meeting in the entire financial year. So it talks about what the annual general meeting can do. Approve dividends, elect officers, and yeah. Regulation 16, even more important because this is a right that has been attempted to be infringed within the last couple of years. Regulation 16 deals with the right of a member to attend general meetings. Now, let me hold on to this one. If every member under Regulation 16 has the right to attend meetings, if you say to me that you are having a hybrid meeting, one, and as part of the process for this hybrid meeting, you must register before the meeting to attend, and you must register like 2 weeks ahead. If for some reason I did not see that notice to register ahead of time, and I turn up at the venue for the meeting on the day of the meeting, can you legitimately say to me, well, I didn't register before, so I can't attend? Is that not you infringing on my right under Regulation 16 to attend my meeting? Think about that a second. Because
Is it
I've been
that
having some. Go ahead.
is it that this is done to quiet this dissenting voices? Well, I guess that's the thing. There could be a give the pressure. But it's an excellent point, Mr. Chambers, because I have seen what you are stating, what you're describing here. I have seen that, and maybe how it could be perceived as, limiting those that can attend the meetings.
Guided democracy. No, people have said all sorts of things to me. They say that the provider for the virtual platform says that they need people registered in advance. And my response to that is get a better provider. Yeah? Then 1 minute they say for the on-site location is about catering. So I say, okay, if I walk with my own sandwich and my own juice, I don't have a catering problem. Because I walk with my own thing. How can you block me from attending a meeting for the organization that I am part owner of? So that what at the commissioner's office we have started to do for people who ask for approval for hybrid, and you still need approval for hybrid, you don't need approval for face-to-face, because that's how it has always been. We are saying to them, we will approve the hybrid. However, your notice must state to persons that registration should be up until the day of the meeting. However, you encourage people to register in advance because the venue may have limited capacity. You see the difference there? But again, we can't play smart with foolishness. And again, I rely on supervisory committee. Because you cannot tell me that you have gone to rent a venue that could only hold 400 or 500 people, but your membership is 200,000. Why are you doing that? So you went for a venue that cannot even hold 25% of your members? No, we're not serious. And that is something you and I will go to court over. Because you're wrong. Regulation 18. And I want to read this one out because this one is important. We have found ourselves in court over this one. So Regulation 18, subsection 1. The annual general meeting of a society of which at least 7 days notice shall be given to members. Now, at least 7 days notice. Your bylaw most likely will have 14 days. And that's perfectly all right because the law says at least 7. 14 days is more than 7. Yeah? Shall be convened by the board not later than, it used to be 1 month, is now not later than 3 months after the report on the audit of the accounts is received by the board. Now, earlier on, you realize I had a mischievous question. And my mischievous question had to do with the fact if the audited accounts is late. And somebody, I think it was Marlon, highlighted the fact, but if the account late, it means that my AGM also going to be late. The trigger for your AGM is the receipt of the accounts, receipt of the audited accounts by the board. Now, if you need an extension of time, because you are now going outside of what the law says, you need to write the regulator's office for permission for that extension of time. Now, I hope you're with me. There's a lot more that could be said there. Like I said, we ended up in court for that one, and we haven't lost. Yeah? Because within your bylaws, it says that any interpretation rests with the commissioner. Why would you want to go and spend money to hire a senior counsel and you're spending members' money to fight the regulator? That's not making sense. So your trigger for your AGM is receipt of the audited accounts. So having said that, here's a trick question. If you, what today is? Thursday. If you get the audited account signed off by the auditor today, Thursday, it means that's your trigger to call your AGM. If you posted the notice for your AGM last week, was that a valid notice? That's a real question. I'm pausing for answer.
Well, Marlon here, based on what you just explained, to put a notice of an AGM and you have not received your audited financials, then that notice is invalid.
Correct. Very correct. And you see these fine things, members are beginning to pay attention to these things. There was a time you might have slipped through that, but that time has passed. So all of these things we had to look at. The board has to pay attention, and the supervisory committee, since they have a certain level of oversight, you have to pay attention to what the board is doing. Because if you do that, it means your notice for your meeting is improper. By extension, it means when you actually have the AGM, that could be improper. And if a member comes and challenges that, it means your entire AGM could now be declared void. And you're forced to do over the whole AGM. Oh, that's not coming cheap, right? All right.
Jerome, one question, Marlon here. You had stated earlier with regards to the hosting of the AGM with regards to the venue.
Yes.
Right. So based on over the years where credit unions would mostly do choose venues based on the past AGMs for the past years because right, you have 3,000 members, 80 persons would show up, so you're looking for a venue that could hold 110 or 100 because the habit is
Yeah.
100. Because going on the basis where you say that somebody who has 14,000 members and would get a venue that only holding 200, and then is there a gauge in which the guide credit unions say, well, you're supposed to your venue must be able to facilitate more than 25% of your membership? Or is that guide? Is
There
there?
is no gauge. There is no gauge, but if we were to go to court, the court would rule what would be considered reasonable in all these circumstances.
Okay.
So let's say if you are accustomed having 300 people turn up for your AGM, and that considering whatever your quorum is. But you go to a venue that could only accommodate 50 people, and you try to force the other people to go online. And note I say force, because on the normal turnout would be 300. So if you go for a venue to only take 50, it means that you are forcing 250 to go online who want to be active, actual participants in their business. Because when you're online, you could get bumped off, right? So yeah, things like that, very uncomfortable. So that when we look at approvals for hybrid meetings now, and we will not approve any virtual meetings. It has to be a hybrid meeting. We always ask questions relating to the capacity of the actual venue. Because online you could take any amount, and there are benefits to that because there are people who are out of the country, and if not for that, they would not have been able to attend. By way of example, I attended RAN's AGM this year, probably about 2-3 weeks ago. And because they have a lot of members in Tobago, they use a small ballroom in Magdalena as the base. They use RAN's rooftop in Trinidad as another physical base. And the other people could join online. So they gave persons 2 bites of the cherries, 2 actual locations. And I'm trying to remember what was the total, boy. But I think the total ended up being like back in the old days when we used to go down Chaguaramas Convention Center, 900 and more. But the people who wanted to be there, because RAN's rooftop was full. I was in Magdalena and it was full as well. So people, and because we told them, registration must be up till the day of the meeting. The only time you're supposed to be talking about stopping registration is just before election. And you're doing that in order to manage your credential committee report. You ain't trying to manage to keep people out. So, yeah, I hope that helps. Right. Well, I didn't realize I had regulation 18 here, yes, but yeah, so I did. Well, I had a number of them. Okay. All right. We're almost at 8 o'clock. So let me make sure there's nothing that I wanted to. Right. Well, these you could read when you get it. Right. Well, you'll get these when you get it. I think the majority of what I wanted to leave with you guys, I did.
So can I
Are
ask
there any
one?
specific? Well, I'm not going to ask you any specific question that I didn't touch on.
Sir, I joined later. Sorry, I joined late, but I will watch back this presentation. Really appreciate feedback. Want to hear your feedback on this. I believe that as of now, credit unions only pay up to, I think, 50,000 of our members shares to their beneficiaries, right? If they are deceased and anything in excess, you have to get letters of administration for. I was just thinking with that sort of law that essentially protects some of the credit unions' cash, limits the amount that the beneficiary would receive. Because believe that, filing for letters of administration would take some time. Then there's a cost to doing so, because I don't believe that as a member of the public can just file for it. You have to go through an attorney depending on the amount. If it's more than 4,800, then you have to pay an attorney for that, so that fees coming on to how much you would actually receive. So whether it's practical to pay, to apply for it. So, and then the remaining amount would possibly be liable to statutory deduction if the member has any loans and stuff. It's something I never really paid attention to as a young person, because I've been in credit union since I was a teenager. I never really paid much attention to it because, well, you're a young person and you think about dying or passing or anything. But now, as I've gotten older, I have now started to consider that.
You're
So,
feeling your mortality.
yes, yes.
Well, all right, it's a good question. Now, when the law was originally passed for credit unions, well, for cooperatives, the limit actually was 5,000. A couple of years ago, it was raised from 5,000 to 50,000. And I am aware, under the last administration, there were two things being discussed. One was carrying it to 100,000, and the second one was removing the limit entirely. I cannot say what will be the approach of this particular administration to that, but the things that were being discussed, that's out of the window right now. I also know that coming from the implementation committee that was appointed by the last cabinet to deal with the future role of the credit union movement, we also had discussions about removal of the limit. And I know we would have examined a number of different institutions. I remember in particular looking at Unitrust in terms of how they did it. And while on the face of it, it may seem that the beneficiary gets all the money, it is because they are set up differently and they are not meant to operate like a credit union. So there was a time I was led to believe that the 5,000 was meant to be for funeral expenses. And depending on who you speak to, they will still tell you that it's really for funeral expenses for the deceased member, that sort of thing. But I've managed to debunk that because the early days when I was working on the legislation, 5,000 for me, okay, funeral. But somebody who was around longer than me said, Jerome, that's not correct. Because in 1971, $5,000 could buy a house in Diamond Vale. So it could never have been for funeral expenses. And I took the time and I managed to get the Hansard records from Parliament from 1970. And they were correct. Nowhere in the parliamentary debate was it ever mentioned that that money was for funeral expenses. So nobody seems quite sure. It's left over from the 70s. It could be the time has passed. For a long period of time, I would admit I was against it raising because in my career, I've seen many instances where the credit union paid out the money to the wrong person. They would pay it off to somebody who comes with the death certificate and or was familiar to them with the deceased member coming. So let's say I go to the credit union regularly and who you see as my wife or my girlfriend is always with me. And then one day she comes and says, well, Jerome passed away, XYZ. And because everybody believes she's the one, she's paid the money. But about a week after, the named beneficiary appears, providing proof that they're the actual named beneficiary. Now, the credit union never looked before, never checked. At that point, my phone normally would ring. I say, well, Jerome, what we go do? And my response normally is, well, we will pay it again. Because the first person you paid, you had no business paying them. This person is the rightful person to be paid. And is the next question, eh? So what happens to the money we already paid? So, well, I suppose you could say it was a grant because you expended money without authority. So I was always concerned about that. But my legal colleagues are saying to me, Jerome, the credit unions need to sort themselves out. Nobody tell them make bad payments. So I think the only thing that we considered in the law is that the credit union may be given up to a year or 6 months to delay the payment in an effort that they could now properly check their records before they expend funds. But for now, it is 50. The others fall into letters of administration. Any other interesting questions? That was an interesting question. I
Hi,
see
Joe.
something in the chat room.
Sorry.
I've seen two things in the chat there. Oh no, I answered those questions already.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Marlon.
Go ahead, Marlon.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Christian. Joe, earlier it said with regards to registration deadline for AGMs, where you said that
Yeah.
you would prefer if it goes as close to the hosting, the date of the AGM.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to get guide because I know most of the time we try to, as you rightfully said, we use it as a gauge for catering, but then that should not really be the measuring stick with regards to deadlines for a member registering for his AGM. Because it is a corner. So I think you're on mute.
Oh, I am?
No, you're not here anywhere. Sorry.
No. Yeah. No, I said I'm walking with my own doubles and my red solo.
Okay.
You not to worry about catering.
Afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Jerome. I just have a question with regards to election. Right? No, most times when persons or members would walk in when election ballots are given out or almost completed, do the members still have that right to vote
Relax.
when all the
Well, I was
ballots
talking
are
about,
done?
no, I hear. While I was talking about the registration, I said the only time I support stopping registration or stopping people from coming in will be just before election because it affects the credential committee report. But you see, I would take a credential just before election start. So that's before ballots are handed out. If you come in while the process is going on, anytime I have a challenge to my election process, you have interfered with my counting, my credential. Because my credential may have said to me, there are 300 people here. So I know I must never be able to get more than 300 ballots. If you come in after, I will end up with more than 300 ballots. And I can't verify them because I started with 300. Follow me? So that's a justifiable reason
Yeah, thank you.
to stop that.
I probably missed that part, but thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
Nadine, you asked something about the Limitation Act. It's 4 years for simple contracts. Of course, any payment or acknowledgement of the debt acts as restarting the clock. So when you send the demand letter, that sets the restarting of the clock. If you get somebody who understands that collection, when you speak to me on the phone, your aim is to get me to acknowledge the debt. That resets the clock as well. Receiving funds from the
So that's
beneficiary or receiving funds as a, all right. Now looking at a question here, what is the statute of limitation regarding receiving funds as a beneficiary? I'm not sure I understand that particular question. That's slightly different because you are talking now about you as the beneficiary of the deceased receiving funds from the institution. Now, it's important to understand you don't have any contract with the institution. The contract with the institution is between the deceased member and the institution. And the deceased member doesn't really have rights per se that would have been a testamentary gift from them to you. I'm hoping that I understand your question. Is your question that, okay, I'm a member of the credit union, the member dies. Is there a period of time beyond which the credit union could say that they don't have to pay the beneficiary? Is that the question? No. Because once the member dies, the money in the member's account is now being held on a constructive trust by the credit union. It's not the credit union's money, it's the member's money. But because the member has died and a dead person can't own anything, a trust is created under law. So they now must hold it for the benefit of the named person. Well, if that sounds slightly confusing, just think of all the movies you've looked at where you hear somebody is a trust fund baby, or they're getting money from some trusts that are apparently for them. All right, that's a trust that would have been created by the testator, who's the deceased person. In the case of a constructive trust, that happens not because the person did it or created, but it happens through the effect of law. It's called a constructive trust.
Hi, Mr. Chambers. Sir, right here again. Just wanted to share to the member that was asking about the statute of limitation regarding the collection of a debt, and once 4 years has passed, it is not it's not legal to accept to continue collecting the debt, right? On the debt. But members could still pay towards it, right? What I wanted to say is that as I worked as a collection officer before, also as a debt collector, specialization on collecting on credit union debt. So I have a little bit of an understanding in how the credit unions issue credit and their debt reconciliation process. I would strongly encourage members on this call and those that I talk to reconcile the debts that they have, even though you may be in a certain position where you cannot liquidate the entirety of the balance. You can still make small payments towards the debt over a period of time to soften it, right? Whatever that amount may be, making payments, they definitely helps. What some persons think is that, well, the 4 years pass, so you can't legally collect on it. However, your credit rating is still bad because the creditor can then forward your bad credit to a TransUnion. And even if you do a TransUnion check and it does not show up there are local debt collection agency where they can run a credit report on you. So I remember when I was applying for a job to Maritime Financial, and I had to go through the process of actually doing a credit check with EV Knowles, which is a popular collection company. Once that debt is registered there at a debt collection company there, and the HR department contacts him and they see that you are owing money, this can impact your ability to get jobs. I've seen persons where they try to they get you the job in the bank, and this is the moment, this is the time, and only to see a bad credit report from Digicel. Yes, people, Digicel with their internet services and their mobile plans, when you are owing them money and there isn't reconciliation day, they forward your name to collection companies and your name stays there in that database. And now you have to go through the process of trying to get a letter of non-indebtedness. But what can happen is that the letter of non-indebtedness can come from the collection agency, and sometimes the cost of the letter can be exorbitant. I remember for one that I was working for, the cost of a letter of non-indebtedness was $350 for a letter. So for those on persons really need to be careful with that. While you can get into debt, it's always good to acknowledge the debt. It's always good to communicate to the credit union the position that you're in writing. Make as many payments as you could towards the debt because you can come out of debt, right? You can do it. It is possible. It is doable. I've seen people who've been in debt. They've been there. They may seem dead and buried, and they have come out of it a better person. So Some persons think that they can just get off scot-free. No, you don't get off scot-free. You can get a delayed response, negative response to that. And then if you don't look to attack it while you're younger in your career, in your profession, in your life, and as you get older, it becomes more arduous because maybe you're not heading into a pensionable age, you have children, you're paying a mortgage for a house, then it becomes difficult to find that extra cash to pay off for that. And also as well too, from my experience in collecting on these debts, what I have found is that credit unions increase the interest rate because they've generated so much debt. Members fail to pay off the debt. They say we can't take no loss. Now these are not things that is going to be, credit unions are going to see that. But for those of us who've worked in collections, we could see that. So now for future generation, now they have to essentially pay more, work longer, try to get more money because the debt is there. Even though they could say that they write off the debt, they make structural changes for the issuance of credit, such as you work longer, a monetary policy, such as an increase in the interest rate. So you now have to put up more. So I could tell by, as I could say, for example, this is just me sharing a personal part. I'm interested in applying with the Tranquility Credit Union for a loan, right? And I have been doing my survey in terms of, which credit union can give me the best offer. And I applied I spoke with representative of Venture Credit Union, and the amount that I need the loan for, they require half the amount, right? Right? Tranquility is requiring a lower amount, right? And that tells me that, in my opinion, that Venture has to demand so much upfront because they have so much debt owing, right? That tells me that. So they don't want to be in a position where they want to lose because previously they may have lost out when it comes to issuing loans. So, I'm a thrifty person, so I kind of look at things in terms of saving and stuff. I always encourage credit unions where I think that the credit union movement is expanding, it's being innovative, but I think that credit unions should remember who they are. Sometimes we have to remember who we are, right? So that we don't make decisions that are detrimental. And as they say in Trinidad, go Paul luck is not see Paul luck. Some persons would make some decisions and not feel the deleterious effects of those decisions as you would face that, as your situation is different as a single mother, a single father, a person battling cancer. Who knows? So please be cautious. Don't take out too much
Said.
credit for something at the same time. Becomes way too
Well said.
difficult to pay off.
Yeah,
Thank
well
you so
said, well
much for
said.
that contribution, Saret.
Uh,
We will
Um,
take one more question on the topic at hand for Mr. Chambers, that anybody had any questions relating to the presentation and the information shared. One last question. Thank you for your contribution, Roy. I see the claps in the chat.
I have one question, for Mr. Chambers. As relates to special general meetings, does the supervisory committee have power to initiate such a meeting?
short answer is yes. Of course, under particular circumstances, the supervisory committee has the ability to suspend an elected officer. To confirm or to remove that suspension, they call for a special general meeting.
Yeah, thanks.
All
That's
right,
it.
thank you. That was our final question. So now we have come to the end of our very educational webinar. Thank you, Mr. Chambers, for empowering us with all that information. I am very sure that it was well received. Members, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us this afternoon, for taking that time to be with us, and also to remind you that this session was recorded and you would be able to access this recording in the future. Also, we have a session tomorrow. Please go out on the credit committee. Please feel free to join us then. I hope you all have a great night, and thank you again, Mr. Chambers, for giving us all that knowledge that you have today.
Well, most welcome. Good night, all.